Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. I'm Lysha from Lysha Be Creative, and in today's tutorial we are jumping headfirst into the month of December, and to kick things off we are going to be making this super cute tumbler and tray just in time for milk and cookies to be put out for Santa to visit this holiday season. So of course everything that I use in today's tutorial will be listed and linked down in that description box below. Make sure you check that out for discount codes as well as all the links to my social media and of course my Facebook group, Lysha Be Creative Community. If you haven't already, make sure you give this video a huge thumbs up as well as subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any of my future tutorials. So let's go ahead and jump right into today's tutorial. Hey everybody, so let's go ahead and get started. So we're starting with a 16-ounce travel mug from the Steel Magnolia, and we're going to do a tack it method glitter application here. I have already prepped and sanded my cup and spray painted this with a candy apple red from Rust-Oleum. So now I'm just going to use my tack it over and over glue and a wide paintbrush, and I'm going to paint on a thin coat of the tack it over and over glue until I have a nice thin layer throughout my entire cup. You definitely want to make sure that for any time you are using a handled mug that you are paying very close attention to the handle, as that is probably the most tedious part of working with cups that have handles. Making sure that you get coverage on that handle with your paintbrush, whether you're using Mod Podge, Epoxy method, or doing tack it with your application for glitter. So I'm just going to put a thin coat of this tack it on my cup. When it's nice and thin, I'm then going to take my heat gun and speed up the process of the glue drying so that it is at its tacky state so we can go ahead and apply the glitter. With my tack it nice and tacky, I am going to go ahead and apply Burgundy Carnation from Aisha Creations all over this cup. This is a gorgeous red. It's got a gorgeous like dark deep red color with some holographic pieces in there, so it really has some gorgeous sparkle. So as soon as this is fully covered, I'm definitely going to make sure I get all of that handle covered as well as the bottom so that I can make sure I have full coverage on this tumbler. And then of course, as soon as I have this tumbler covered in glitter, I'm going to set that aside, put my glitter away, and then of course we're going to rub down this tumbler to make sure that it is nice and smooth onto the cup, making sure that around my handle and especially on my bottom and top rim that I have great coverage and all of that glitter is burnished or flat onto the tumbler. Okay, so now we're going to work on the tray. So I got this cute little metal tray from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to spray paint this tray with this warm caramel color, this brown color from Rust-Oleum. And now that it has been covered in 2 full coats of this warm caramel color, I did also coat it with a clear gloss spray paint just to make sure that I didn't have any issues with my paint chipping. And now we're going to do the same tack it method process with this tray. So with this tray, it's going to be obviously a little bit more tedious and a little bit more work we'll have to do to get the entire tray covered and to get that glitter really burnished down into and flat onto this tray, but it definitely is a gorgeous look at the end. So now with my tray ready to go, I am going to apply my tack it non-diluted directly onto the tray, and I'm going to spread a thin and even coat onto my tray with my wide paintbrush. Just like we did with the travel mug, we'll do the exact same thing with the tray. Now I'm not going to be glittering the bottom portion of this tray. Although I will be epoxying the entire tray, I won't be putting glitter on the bottom just because it's not something you're going to see anyway. And so I feel that as long as the color is the same or very similar to the glitter, I'm just going to do the front portion for the glitter. Okay, so now that my tack it is nice and tacky, we're going to go ahead and apply our glitter. So this is Jitters from Peachy Olive Glitter, and I'm applying a very generous coat to the center part of the tray, and we're going to use all the excess glitter that we have here to get the rims of this tray. So I've applied the tack it all on the front side of this tray. Again, I haven't done anything with the back side. I'm going to leave that just that warm caramel color. And so now with my gloved hand, I'm just going to pick up some of the glitter to make sure that I can get the glitter on all edges of this tray. So from edge to edge, making sure that I have glitter coverage all over this tray. So as soon as that is covered, I will dump out all the excess glitter off of the tray. That way we can save that glitter for future projects. And then let's go ahead and burnish down this glitter. All right, so now let's go ahead and burnish down this glitter. So again, just with my gloved hand, just like we did with the tumbler, we're just going to rub this glitter pretty rough and pretty vigorously, paying attention to the edges of this tray because there are some ribbed edges or like scalloped edges on this tray. So making sure that you're getting into all those crevices and that all of the glitter is flat onto this tray and it all is even. So once we've done that, we are then going to put this aside and we will get ready to epoxy this. So the glitter that is on the paper, just remember that this is not glitter you want to put back into your shaker container because it now is contaminated with your tacket and could then contaminate the rest of your bottle of glitter. But this is great for putting in straw topper molds or coaster molds or whatever you have laying around. Okay, so we're going to epoxy this tray next. So I wanted to show this to you guys, just something that I do when I am using either acrylic blanks, using trays, or something that I'm going to be putting epoxy on that may fall off the edges and create drips. I like to use my acrylic paint bottles and kind of tape my tray or acrylic blank to them to kind of keep them up in the air in the event that the epoxy does roll off the edges and drip. That way I don't have my tray or whatever item I'm using stuck to the paper that I may be laying it on while it cures. So now that I have my tray stuck to my 4 acrylic paint bottles, we're going to go ahead and epoxy this. So of course you know that I'm using Amazing Quick Coat from Alumilite, and we are going to be applying our 25 mLs of epoxy using a silicone brush. So you could use your hands, that's totally fair. I just knew I'd probably be making quite a bit of a mess if I used my hands and wanted to be able to get full coverage with my silicone brush first and then go in with my fingers and try and make sure that all of my edges are completely covered in epoxy. So taking my silicone brush and just very carefully smoothing over all of that epoxy all along the middle section of the tray and then slowly getting any of that excess epoxy onto the inner curve of the tray. And then the final piece of this when you're epoxying is going to be obviously paying attention to the outer ridge or outer rim or outer edge. So because it has like a ribbed or bumpy edge, I definitely wanted to make sure that I was getting full coverage on the edges and to make sure that it was fully covered, because ideally I'd like to only do 1 coat of epoxy on this tray before I can go ahead and go into decals, because I shouldn't have any reason to need to do any form of sanding. So you're going to see I'm going in with my silicone paintbrush first and making sure that I'm getting epoxy along the edge. And then as I am done covering the edge with my silicone paintbrush, I'll then go in with my gloved hand and just make sure that I'm not getting any drips on the underside by dragging my finger along the under edge of the tray, and making sure that all of the grooves are covered with epoxy to make sure we get a nice, even, and thin coat. So once I am done applying my epoxy, I'm then going to set this aside and let it cure for about 4 to 5 hours before we can go ahead and go in with our decals. So both my tumbler and tray have now been epoxied until smooth, and we have printed off, or cut rather, our decals for our tray and our cup. So now's the time to do any necessary sanding that we need to do. The tumbler did get 2 full coats of epoxy on the cup, and the tray has a coat of epoxy on the glittered side and then a coat of epoxy on the back side of the tumbler. So I'm just going to give my tumbler a quick sand because it has been sitting for 24 hours, and I want to make sure that my layers of epoxy, that final layers, do stick and adhere to the base layer. So I'm going to take that and clean that with either dish soap and water, or you can certainly use a coffee filter with some rubbing alcohol to get off any of that debris from your sanding. And now we're going to go ahead and apply our decals. So all the decals that I have cut with my Cricut, I will list in the description box down below. I got these super cute decals, of course, from Etsy. That's kind of where I get any and all of my decals. And so I will definitely list those in the description box with the shops that you can purchase them for yourselves if you're looking to recreate these. And of course, all of the sizes that I use for this tray and tumbler set in case you're looking to recreate this tumbler and tray set as is. So we're going to go ahead and apply our gingerbread man to the one side of the tumbler. So this is, again, using that Cricut textured foil type vinyl that I have been using and loving. This is more of a bronze gold color. It's not quite a true gold, but I thought it matched perfectly with the glitter that we chose to use on the tray, Jitters, and so I just thought this would be a great match to that to make it a complete set. So now we're just going to hand place all of the different pieces that go on the gingerbread man, so his eyes and his mouth, and of course the 3 buttons and the little squiggly lines that go on his arms and legs. You certainly could, in Cricut Design Space, instead of hand placing them as I am, you certainly could attach all of these white pieces and then just use a piece of transfer tape to transfer all of the pieces at the same time to your gingerbread person. But that is completely up to you. I just figured hand placing, I can use less vinyl this way as well. And they were small enough pieces where I didn't feel like I was going to have any issues with getting them applied when hand placing them. So of course, now that that is finished, I am then going to turn this tumbler over and we're going to apply the other decal. So on the flip side of this, this is going to say Milk for Santa. So of course, this is a milk and cookies set for Santa when he comes and visits this month. So of course we got to make sure we have a nice mug for Santa to drink out of. So I'm going to be applying this cute little hand lettered file that I found off Etsy that says Milk for Santa, and I thought it just went so well with the Cookies for Santa SVG that I was able to find on Etsy as well, and so I thought they both complemented each other. So I am making sure that I'm placing my decal a little bit lower than I normally would, as we are going to be adding a kind of milk drip, a white drip to this tumbler as well. And so I want to make sure that the drip doesn't end up covering any of the words that you're not able to read. And of course, now we're going to apply the decal to the tray. So I'm just going to apply this in 2 sections here. I just felt it would be the easiest to do to make sure that I can get it as centered on the tray as possible. So applying cookies to the tray first, and then we'll go back with that same piece of transfer tape and apply the For Santa portion at the bottom. So something I wanted to make sure that I did, but I didn't think about it until afterward, was to lower the letters just slightly, the decal kind of closer to the bottom rim or bottom curve of that tray, just so that when I do go to apply my drip, I don't have to babysit my drips as much. That way I don't have to really stress about them covering the letters. I wanted to make sure that this is still able to be read, that you can still see that it says Cookies for Santa, and that obviously my drips don't take over or take away from it being able to be read off of the tray. So I'm going to finish this up, and then we are going to put 1 coat of epoxy on both items and then get ready for our drips. And now, of course, it's time for drips. So I have about 25 mLs here, almost 30 mLs of epoxy, and I have put just a little bit of some white epoxy dye into my epoxy there. And I did, of course, add my epoxy additive, my thickener, which I will also link down in the description. So if you need help with drips, I'm not going to go into too much depth with this drip because I did do a very in-depth tutorial when I did my true crime tumbler a couple of months ago. So I'll definitely link that right here so that you guys can check that out in case you need help with doing your epoxy drip. So I'm just going to take my stir stick here and apply the white epoxy along the edge and rim of my tumbler here, and making sure that I am getting full coverage all the way up to the top rim, because I want to make sure that as this drips down that the epoxy doesn't start to move away or gravitate from the rim, so that that red glitter is exposed underneath. Something else that you could certainly do if you're worried about not getting full coverage at the top rim and that your epoxy starts to kind of float down too far, is you could always take some white acrylic paint or whatever color your drip is going to be and paint the top portion around your tumbler. That way, in case your epoxy does start to kind of repel away from that rim, you won't be able to tell whether it's drip or paint because it's all the same color. So now I'm going to take these super cute holiday sprinkles that I got from Glitter Makes It, which I, of course, will link in the description box, and I'm going to sprinkle these onto the tumbler. So you can certainly place them with tweezers, which I actually do on the turner to make sure I get full coverage, but you can also sprinkle them on as well. The one thing you do want to make sure is that when you're sprinkling them, to make sure that the ones that are stuck to the epoxy, that they are laying flat onto the epoxy and not sticking straight up, so you don't have any issues with applying your coats of epoxy and having sharp sprinkles sticking up all over the place. So now that this is done, I'm going to put this on the turner and let that spin, so if the drip doesn't go any farther than it does right now. And let's go ahead and do the drips on the tray. So now we're going to do the same thing with the tray that we did with the tumbler. So I'm going to be doing the drips on this tray as well. And the only thing that you want to make sure here is that we do have to babysit this a little bit more so than we do our tumbler, just because we can't put this tray on a turner. So we do have to make sure that we're very mindful and very careful with how we're applying our epoxy here, and that we are babysitting it and making sure that it doesn't drip along the backside of the tray, as well as making sure that our drip obviously doesn't set too far onto the decal that we wouldn't be able to read it. So I'm just taking my stir stick, just like I did with my tumbler, and going along that edge to create that drip. And I wanted to make sure that I had a thick enough drip on the rim here so that I didn't have any repelling away from the edge so that the glitter was exposed underneath. But I also wanted to make sure that it was thick enough to be able to drip forward when I tilt the tray downward so that that epoxy starts to come away from the edge. So kind of hard to explain. It's much easier to kind of just watch and see what I'm doing here, but I'm just trying to create a thick enough layer on that rim there. That way when I do start to tilt that tray just slightly to get that epoxy moving, that it does drip in a very nice fashion towards the decal. And so I'm just going to gently tap this and just make sure that I can get that epoxy really moving. And once I get it kind of moving, I'm just going to set it back down and kind of touch up where I feel like I need a little bit more of the drip there, and just make sure that I have obviously even coverage along all of the edges there. So my goal here obviously is just to make sure that I don't have any repelling off the edges, and making sure that I don't have any weird holes or that my drips are going too far covering my decal. So as soon as I feel like I have pretty good coverage, I'm just going to continue to tilt back and forth my tray kind of upright and then down when I want my drips to stop, so that we can go ahead and apply our sprinkles. So I'm going to apply my sprinkles here with tweezers. I am going to pour a little bit too, just because I was having a tough time getting more than like 1 or 2 sprinkles with my tweezers here. So I did drip or sprinkle some of them on there as well. But tweezers are great for making sure you're getting even placement of your tweezers, or of your sprinkles rather, not your tweezers, using your tweezers, but even distribution of all of your sprinkles along your drip here. And it's great to make sure that you're pushing down those sprinkles with your tweezers so that you don't have any issues in your final coats of epoxy. So this tray is just about done here. I'm just going to push in the sprinkles that are on top of the epoxy into the epoxy a little bit so that I don't have any issues with my final coats of epoxy. And then of course, for both items, both my tray and my tumbler, I'm going to give these 2 final coats of epoxy to make sure everything is nice and sealed in as soon as my drip has been sealed. And of course, now this cute set is completely ready for Santa. I hope you loved today's tutorial. If you did, make sure you give this video a huge thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys again next week.